Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to class today. Thank you for joining me, whether you're watching live or you're watching the recording. I appreciate you watching. So today we got, basically a simple topic to talk about, moving on to Module 6 here. And I really just kind of want to talk about React developer tools today. In Web 140, we talked about the regular developer tools. The React developer tools are an additional add-on, but they do help to give us some insight about our own React applications and React applications that we could use every day, and we may not even know they're React applications. So what I'd like to do here, and I was going to use one of the ones that we have on GitHub, but I got to thinking about it, and that's not going to have the React stuff on it. But what I'd like to do today is I'd like to just look at a couple sites using these React developer tools, show you the kinds of things that they can do, and just talk about how we can use them to help us troubleshoot and work with our own sites that we're using. Ideally, you'd want to use these on your live sites. So I do have a live site here that I've been working on that's kind of a little teaser for what we're going to do in Module 7 for live classes. So I think I'll use that. Trying to make sure there's no sensitive information on it. Use that as our small example, and then do a bigger example here of a different website with a different React application. But I'm currently here on the React Developers Tools page, which is a part of the React documents. This is linked in Module 6, so if you want to or need to install the React developer tools for yourself, you have that option in there to go be able to get this plugin. It is a plugin for your browser that extends your regular developer tools. We can see here it's for Chrome, it's for Firefox, it's for Edge. And when it says Chrome here, that's any Chromium-based browser. So I'm using Opera GX here, and Opera's Chromium-based, so you can just use the Chrome extension in there if you're an Opera user. But it's got everything here for you. What it does is when we look at our Inspect Element panel, everything in general looks pretty much the same, right? But let's look at this Elements panel here. I mean, we've written a lot of React now, and if we look at the Elements panel is the rendering of the output that comes after we, render our React application. So this doesn't have any of the React components, the React props, the React states, hooks, anything like that in it, right? It just has HTML, CSS. Here's a little bit of JavaScript, but this is just regular old JavaScript here, right? This is the JavaScript that sets dark mode here on our React Dev Tools or our React.dev documentation site. We can actually see what this is doing here. It is setting a theme. We can set the dark theme. It changes it to the dark theme. We can set the light theme. It changes it to the light theme. And then it uses local storage, which is our local browser memory, to save that selection if we choose something. So that's all that's doing. But this is built in React, right? So we would think if it's built in React, we would want to be able to see the components, and all of that sort of stuff to help us make sense of this. And that's what React Devs Tools is for. So, in previous classes in Web 140, we've looked at the Elements panel, we've looked at the Console panel, Sources, Network, Performance, all of these up here, basically. But you can see here that there are two new tabs here that we've never seen before. They've got a little React logo beside them here, or a little approximation of the React logo here beside them. And these are called Components and Profiler. And so these are our React Dev Tools that help us out here. And so if we click these on our site, we can actually see and manipulate, just like we could with any other developer tools, all of the React components, the React hooks, the React props, and things that we have in our live application on the internet. Now, the profiler in particular not going to be exceptionally useful to. But the components panel will be. All right, so let's click on the components panel and see how our view changes. And we see it changes a lot. And one of the things that we kind of see here is that, we kind of get a good picture of just how much or how many components a regular React site uses. And we can also see some of the different libraries and different things like that, like when we bring in React Router, for example. We can see that kind of stuff listed out in here. For example, there is the context provider here, which lets us know that this uses the context library for React in it. The context library in particular is not one that we're talking about. It can be pretty useful. Maybe I'll talk about it in one of the project live streams I do here at the end of the semester. It's a bit more of a upper level sort of concept. And I'm not sure it's used as much anymore as it once was. Right? So the context library or the context API, basically what that does for us is it sort of allows us to, what's the best way to describe it? So how we, similar to the way we use state, when we use state hook, we can use context. And context would allow us to, best way to kind of describe it on the fly, the theme handler would probably be a good place to use the context API. Right, because it basically lets us kind of trickle data down. So if we want to make some particular data available to every component, we'd use the context API. And so if we say had a dark mode and it flipped a dark mode switch, we could use the context API to sort of trickle down something being context through every component, or something being in dark mode through every component in our site. We can also do something similar with state, though, and use state. So it's really not a necessary thing. for us to learn, and I do believe it's kind of just I think it might be a little bit of an older way to kind of do some things in React there. But that's the context. So when we see context.provider here, that's what that means. That means they're using the context API. And then we can see all the components they're using here. And then on the right-hand side here, we can see the different props that they're using and the different hooks that they're using. So if they're using use effect, we can see that. If they're using router, we can see router information here. And so a lot of this is going to be informational, right? And so, when we first started talking about dev tools in the regular classes, that was one of the ways that we kind of understood dev tools in the very beginning. Is that, we can look at these things and we can see how other websites are built, the types of HTML they use, the types of CSS they use, and how we can work with that. And so the components panel here in React Developer Tools gives us a similar ability on websites online, right? We can look and we can see like, okay, so this uses this component has this data value assigned to it, this prop or this whatever, right? So like in their React code, we could probably assume, they're referencing an HT component, and then somewhere it says children equals learn, class name equals all these classes, href equals, right? And then passing those props to this item. And as we go through, we can see a lot of things in here. There's a lot of stuff. And we can see the props and we can see everything it's working with. We can also use search here to search through the props. Or we could use this select button here. We could take and we could hover over something that's on the page, and that will take us directly to it. And then we can look at that specifically, right? So we can see that this Z prop here, or this Z component here, has specifically a title of you will learn, right? So if we were to look at that in a React application, what that would probably look like would be Z title equals you will learn. And then at the component level, it uses that that's in your return statement. And at the component level, wherever you have your Z component, you're returning that title prop as a part of the component. Something like that in a nutshell, right? So as we're reading this, just trying to provide you a little bit of context so you can see just kind of the way that, we should be reading this. That's what we can kind of assume there is that sort of thing. And we can look at all the different components here and see what's going on there, the components and the subcomponents that are all nestled in. And so if we look at something smaller, like a program that we would make, this is a little to-do list program that I've made to make sure that I have everything all ready. We'll be doing something, we'll basically be doing this thing as a part of our live classes for Module 7. Some of them at least. Or one of them at least. Another one would be doing something a little bit different. But let's, if we were to look at the inspect element tool here for a tool like this, we can find our components. And we can see here, this looks a little bit more like what we would use, right? You can see everything here is in my app component, right? I don't have any of these weird sort of obfuscating component names here. Everything is in my app component. I'm using some things from the material UI library in here, which will be part of what we do in Module 7 as well. We're going to use a UI library to bring in UI components to our sites from another library. So you can see where I have those. And this is more straightforward. Right? This is more straightforward than the React developer tools in general. So if we were to look at something like this here, we can see here in my hooks I have states. These states here come out of my database. So it has a unique ID that's in my database. We're using a Firebase database for this application. So you can actually see the states of my data at their current place in time, the ID and item, or the ID and data value that's in there. And you can actually see a lot of this information here. And you can also come in here and you can change this information. And this is just a local change, right? So if I wanted to come in here and change this item to be from star instructor program to be something else, to be a new test item, since I entered that through developer tools instead of through the site, that's a temporary change, right? So we can use that just like we would kind of do that sort of thing on a regular site. Go in and change state values, go in and change this and that, just to see how that would impact our site without having to actually make the changes to the site. Right, being able to do it in a temporary, controlled environment, because when I refresh the site, it goes back to normal because everything was temporary. Which is pretty cool, right? There's your errors if there are some minor errors in here as well, although that does also appear in your console. Does seem to be a minor error here, a little warning error. But I think that's probably something that we can fix relatively easily. More of a trivial sort of non-issue. And where it would get really interesting is when we got to bigger sites that utilize React. For example, Postmates. Now you might be wondering, like, well, what would it look like or what would it do on a site that doesn't use React? So before we do that, let's have a look at clevelandcc.edu. I don't think they used any React in creating the site. It is on WordPress, so it's probably just standard, but I guess we're about to find out. Inspect element. And see, no React, no tab at all. So if React wasn't used on the site, it doesn't even load the tabs into your Inspect Elements tool. It just gives you the regular Inspect Elements tool. It's only if that site in particular utilizes React in its UI that it actually even renders those tabs at all, which is good. So we can see here, this is where there are a lot of things going on here. We can see they use context, the context API a lot. Absolute ton of stuff going on here. Let's have a look at this. Let's have a look at this form field. See what's going on there. Try to find the upper level of this form field here. Looks like it's probably this. All right, there's a lot of stuff going on here, so it's kind of hard to tell what's going on. We can look at context values here. So we can see some CSS that's been added to it. Different things going on here. If we keep going down the tree, here we have that deliver entry address child here. Looks like an ARIA label or some sort of label and an ID that's been applied to it. If we look in this context menu, we see CSS and things that have been applied here. You know, this is where we could also, play with these CSS values. All right, so we have colors here. These are our different accent colors. And if they were used in this component, it would let me edit them, but it doesn't look like they were used in this component, I guess, because it's a white background. But an absolute ton of stuff that's going on here. And we can just kind of look through and just look and see what's going on, see what they're using, see what kind of props and hooks are being used. And just see how people are using React on sites. I think that just as much as it kind of can help you make decisions on your site, I think, seeing how other people use something like React on their sites is just as important. Especially when something like React is not easy to see by default, right? It gets rendered and it, gets put out as an output. If we just look at the straight up elements for this site, you don't see any of those component names. You don't see any of that stuff going on here. It's just all the returned output. So it is pretty interesting to use this for that sort of purpose. The other tab that we said existed is the Profiler tab. We said the Profiler tab, not really a big use because, most of the sites that I've tried to use the Profiler tab on, I get this message that it requires a profiling build of React. So it needs 16.5 plus. And I think I want to say I updated my React library early in the year, but it might also depend on the React library that the site itself is using. So maybe if I look at my to-do list application here, it might have something in the profiler. And it does. Yeah, it has something that we can use here. I can hit the record button. I can start recording. I can reload the site. Get a little profile, see what it does here. Maybe click around as it builds a little profile here. And it just gives you some information, the type of stuff that we see in a lot of the other items here. We can look at the different graphs and different timelines here. I mean, this is the profiler in particular is going to be an item that's of lesser importance in general. Gives us some good information about rendering, but overall, not a huge deal. We can try to look at it here in the Postmates site. We can see if they have anything. They don't. By and large, that's what you see. It's just that they don't have any profiling data because the site's using an older version of JSON or older version of React. But since this was created a couple days ago on a on the new version of React, it's got it in there, and we can see the data here. Not really that special. So it's just one of those things. Gives you the ability to try to optimize performance, which is a good thing, but not really a huge deal in the grand scheme of things. So I said that that's where we'd be here, that I would, this would probably be a shorter demonstration here, and that's basically all that I want to talk about for today. So that, that puts us, I think we're good enough to be done for today. That's all that I have for you. If anybody's here with me live and they have any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat now. Otherwise, if you think of some questions later, or something else comes up, or you're watching the video, you're watching the recording, ask me, and you have a question, send it to me in an email, send it to me via Teams, what have you. But that is all that I have for you for today. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.